Ronin. We love stories.
You told me earlier in this interview that you draw inspiration in general from what you see, for example, Netflix documentaries, which was obviously a close inspiration to None of This Is True. Where else did you draw inspiration from for None of This Is True?
So, in fact, even though it is a book about, essentially it's a book about a podcaster and then a Netflix documentary that is made about the contents of her podcast, that wasn't the inspiration. Like I mentioned earlier, I just felt I needed to give this woman a job, and it seemed like a fitting job for her to have. And then everything came as a result of me making that choice. But what actually inspired the book was much more grainy and less obvious, just tiny little flickers of things, because I knew I wanted these two women long before I knew that Alex was a podcaster. So there were a couple of little things. In 2021, I received an email out of the blue from a professor of cultural studies at a London university saying that he had recently started reading my books. He developed a full-blown fanboy, just loved my books, and he specializes in fandom. He's written a lot of books, academic books about fandom as a concept. And he said, I'd really love to write a book about you and your books and why I'm a fan of your books and what it is and your fans, and generally explore those themes. And it was kind of left field thing for me. Number one, as a commercial female author, you don't get treated very seriously very often. And also, he was a man, I was a woman, and he was asking for a lot of access into my personal boundaries, creative and family and personal boundaries. And it really made me stop and think, is this a good idea? Could this be a bad thing? Could this blow my life up? Might this be bad for my career? Might he be a complete freak who upends my life? Might he have an ulterior motive? And I didn't rush into making the decision. Ultimately, I said yes, and we had a really lovely project together for a year. Loved every minute of it. He was an awesome guy. The book was so fun, and it was a very positive thing. But it got all those doubts I had in the early moments of that project made me think that I'd love to write about something like that. Somebody creative who lets somebody into their life because they feel like, number one, sort of a sense of politeness. Number two, a sense of curiosity about how's this going to play out. And number three, a sense of this could be good for my career. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to put a woman in that situation and let this person into her life, and for it to be the nightmare scenario where she should not have let her into her life. So that was what I had in my head. But the whole thing came, there's always one moment, there's always a key that unlocks the door, where it goes from being, vague, I'd like to write about this, to, okay, I can start now. And I was walking my dog one evening and I just glanced up into a window and saw this man, very nondescript, late middle-aged man, sitting at his laptop, staring at the screen. And his apartment behind him was very plain. There was white walls. There was nothing on the walls. It looked quite bleak, not very homely. And I just thought, there's something off about you. There's something off about your story. You've given me the creeps. There's just this whole scenario makes me feel creepy and uncomfortable. And I just had this sense that there was a door behind him and there was something bad behind that door. And the minute I thought that, I thought, I'd love to write about that. And then I thought, that could be, I could use that for this story I want to write about these two women. And I immediately realized then that he would be Josie's husband. And as you know, Walter in the book spends a lot of time sitting in his window looking at his laptop. Yeah. And I thought, if he's Josie's husband, then that means that's Josie's flat. So that's where Josie lives. So I can now picture Josie's flat. And it's very bleak. And so I need to understand the reasons why a married couple would live in such a bleak surroundings. So that suggested layers of backstory that I could get into. But it also meant that I knew geographically where she lived in terms of how she could then connect to Alex. And in London, these very different neighborhoods exist cheek by jowl, very different neighborhoods. So you get these very cheechy, bougie little areas next to these much more sort of socially deprived areas. And I thought, okay, I know exactly where Alex lives. If Josie lives there, then Alex lives in one of those lovely houses over there by the park. And then I could picture her. And then the minute I could picture her house, I could picture her husband and her children. I knew what school they went to and everything. I just thought, okay, I've got my world now. I can see the world. I can see my couples. I can start.
That's very interesting from the perspective of someone reading that book, actually.
Yes. It's not what you think it is. When you read the book, you would imagine the author thought, I want to write a book about a Netflix documentary and a podcast that goes wrong. But that's how it evolved rather than how it was born.
So what is the story about?
The story is about these two women, Alex, who's our very glamorous podcaster, Josie, who is our downtrodden wife. They both turn 45 on the same day and bump into each other in a pub where they're both celebrating their birthdays. Alex is celebrating it with a glamorous gang of friends and they're all drinking champagne and being very loud. And Josie's sitting in the corner with her husband, who's 27 years older than her, which is a very key part of the story. The reason why she has a husband who's so much older than her, celebrating her birthday very quietly. And she sees Alex and thinks she's the same age as me, and then establishes that they were actually born on the same day and in the same hospital. And that unlocks something in Josie. It's that sense of, that switched at birth thing. Like maybe if Alex's mother had taken me home instead of Alex, I could have had her life. And it makes her want to fix everything that's wrong in her broken life. Her life is just broken. And the whole book is really a journey with Alex and Josie discovering how it got broken, why it got broken, and how Josie wants to fix it. So yeah, that's essentially what the book is about.
And it's very thrilling to read it. I can speak for myself now. Also, I brought some numbers. None of this is true. You published it in 2023, I think, and 2024 was the year it blew up internationally.
Yes.
It got an instant Sunday Times bestseller. It gained over 78,000 ratings on Amazon alone, over 852,000 ratings and 4.1 stars on Goodreads, which is very impressive.
Very good for Goodreads.
Yeah, that is really good. I compared it to one of your earlier ones, also one of my favorite books of yours, Then She Was Gone. I really love that. It was the first one I listened to. You published that back in 2017.
Yes.
That gained even over 117,000 ratings on Amazon and also around 850,000 positive ratings on Goodreads, and you sold like millions and millions of copies of your books. We can say that you have a huge fan base. Congratulations to that, by the way.
Thank you.
But how does it feel to have like that big of a fan base?
Honestly, it's amazing. It's incredible. And because what you have to bear in mind is, so my first book came out, as we mentioned, in 1999, and it was a huge bestseller. It had that big hyped up debut energy going on, and it sold a massive amount of books as a result of being the big hyped up debut novel of the year. But that didn't continue. Those levels of sales did not continue. And I kind of turned slightly into a mid-list author as my career went on, which is great. Mid-list author still earns enough money to write full time and, be published. But there was always this sense with my publishers of like, her books are so good. And people who love her books. Why can't we grow her? Why can't we grow her? She should have a massive readership. Why is it not happening? And it really only kicked in for me, this huge exponential growth in my readership and my book sales, weirdly when COVID started, which was a horrible time for a lot of authors, but an incredibly successful time for me. The Family Upstairs became my biggest, it still is my biggest selling UK title, purely because it happened to have been in the supermarkets at the time that lockdown started. And then it became quite viral and became a sort of lockdown classic. and in America at the same time. Then she was gone, which, as you say, had been published in 2017, suddenly became a lockdown staple, was going viral on TikTok. A Real Housewife of Beverly Hills was showing it to her 3 million followers on Instagram. And this book that was published in 2017 suddenly turned up in the New York Times bestsellers. Number 10, number 9, number 8, number 7. And it was number 1. It was number 1 for 6 weeks during 2020. So the combination of what happened for me in the UK that year and what happened in America, and the sense of me being a high profile writer and being a big writer. And a lot of it is about a sense of things rather than the reality of things, how people perceive you as being a big writer as opposed to a mid-list writer, just blew up. And then, you know, Book Talk, a massive part of that, you know, this entire generation of readers who I wouldn't connect with usually because our platforms wouldn't align. But on Book Talk, there's this whole community who are selling my books to each other without me having to do anything. And it's a whole new generation. Just to watch it happen over the last 5 years has been nothing short of breathtaking. I've got photographs of me at American book events in 2019 with about 6 people. And now my American book events in 2024, they're selling out halls. There's 200 people. I'm doing 90-minute signing lines, and it's just the whole thing. And I just went up to 100,000 followers on Instagram, which is really good for an author. I mean, you get people showing you what they feed their children for breakfast who've got more followers than that. But for an author, 100,000 on Instagram is a really good number. And it's the nicest, it's the most extraordinary, validating, euphoric feeling, knowing that at this point in my career, after so many years, that I could do this and I could bring so many new readers along with me, keep my old readers, bring all these new readers and a new generation of readers, and still be writing things that younger readers find relevant and relatable and enjoyable. It's incredible. I can't believe it's happened to me. Like I won the lottery.
As a younger reader, I can say this is completely true. I can totally relate to your characters. I can connect to them. They feel real. They feel like it's happening in real life. And the thing about your stories also is like it always sounds at some point crazy. For example, the family upstairs. But at the same point, like you would think, okay, this could actually happen.
Yeah.
Our team of translators actually asked me, like, there's a lot of uncanny things going on between Josie and Alex. Like, Josie comes to their house while they're not at home, staring through the window, being like a stalker, you know. Has something like that ever happened to you personally?
Oh, no. I'm a very personable human being, but I have this invisible shield, this force field around me. And I'm going to touch wood now to say that I have never had anyone breach my boundaries or make me feel uncomfortable. And I don't know if that's just pure luck and maybe my stalker is just around the corner or my weird experience is about to come. There was this one moment where a few years ago where I accidentally crashed into a parked car. And I left a note under the windscreen wiper to say, I'm really sorry, I've damaged your car. Here's my phone number. And then the woman phoned me up about half an hour later crying, saying that was my mother's car. My mother just died a few months ago and I was holding on to it for sentimental reasons and blah, blah, blah. And she was you could tell she was very brittle and fragile. We arranged for the garage to fix her car, and I said, I will obviously pay for you for your Uber to go and collect your car. She said, no, I'd like you to drive me. And I tried to get out of driving her, but she insisted that I had to drive her. And in that, it was a sort of 20-minute car journey. I was so uncomfortable. I was like, who is this woman in my car? She's making me feel really edgy. There's something not, and she was very, very, I could tell she was the type of person who, if I'd let her in a little bit more, she'd have taken advantage. And I might not have been able to get rid of her. So I had to be quite harsh because she kept messaging me after that and finding reasons to message me about things. And I had to be quite harsh and just sort of cut that off. So that was probably the closest I've ever got to having that sort of experience.
That sounds.
You know what I mean, though, don't you? You know
yes,
those.
Yes, that is kind of uncomfortable. Like you don't want
Yes.
people to cross that border. No.
Exactly.
Why would you
exactly.
do something like that? That's weird.
But
Yeah.
we've all had that moment with a human being where you just thought, oh, actually,
Yes.
no, you make me feel strange. I don't want you in my space.
Ah,
There's something off about you. And
completely.
yeah.
So let's hope this never gets any further than that.
Yes.
Yes, let's just hope.
Let's just.
But you kept telling me about don't letting people in. So that's
Yes.
like a perfect keyword for what's next on our agenda.
Yes.
So there's
Don't let him in.
Yes.
Since I wrote None of This Is True, I've written 2 more novels, one of which I think we might talk about afterwards, which was a one-off project for Marvel. But then the novel I wrote after that, I was so excited, having written out of my genre and in a whole new world, to come back into my world of strange people and psychological thrillers. It's, again, it takes its inspiration from the strange situations that you watch on Netflix documentaries about people being taken advantage of and manipulated.